Welcome to the Grassroots Project second webinar. We are a federally funded initiative supported by the Administration for Community Living. We are administering this project through the Human Services Research Institute, which is where I'm joining you from. My name is Kate Brady. I am a white woman wearing black glasses. I have short, brown, curly hair, and I'm sitting in my office in Atlanta, Georgia, with some paintings behind me. I use she, her pronouns. And at the Human Services Research Institute, I'm co-directing this grassroots project. Today's webinar is titled Coalition Building, Strategies and Perspectives in Disability Advocacy. We would love to have you introduce yourself in the chat if you would like to do so. You can tell us who you are. You can tell us where you're joining from, and feel free to connect with one another there. All participants are currently muted and off camera. And we will be taking questions at the end of this webinar, so would love for you to be thinking about things that you'd like to ask the panelists, and go ahead and put that in the chat and we'll collect up those questions for the end. As you can see, we are currently doing introductions and welcomes, and we'll go over a few logistics from our project team, and then most importantly, I'll be thrilled to have you hear from two of the coalitions that the Grassroots Project is currently supporting, the Going Home Coalition and the Southern Disability Justice Coalition. So that will be phenomenal. And then we will have a facilitated discussion with those panelists in which we can cover some of those questions that you will share in the chat. Some important logistics for you to be aware of. As I mentioned, folks are muted. We'd love for you to use the chat feature. If you run into urgent individual concerns, you are very welcome to email Amy Leminski, one of our contractors, at ALULINSKI@hsri.org. And she'll try to troubleshoot with you as much as possible. The webinar is live captioned in both English and it's live interpreted in Spanish. So you can access the live captions by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you would like to access Spanish interpretation, you can do so by clicking the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's a world icon. Once you're in the Spanish channel, you're going to want to silence the original audio. And at this time, I will read that instruction in Spanish with many apologies for not being a native speaker. Se puede acceder a la interpretación en español en vivo haciendo clic en el botón interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla del Zoom con del mundo. Una vez en el canal español, por favor, silencio el audio original. So it's important for you all to know that due to a recent Zoom update, full accessibility, including ASL interpretation, may not work if you are joining with a mobile device. ASL and interpretation and slides can no longer be viewed simultaneously via a phone or tablet. So you'll need to swipe on your mobile device to find the ASL interpreter, but it will not be possible to see ASL interpretation and the slides due to this recent Zoom update. And we are in direct communication with Zoom about this limitation and are organizing to advocate for a change so that Zoom should be fully accessible, of course. If you require any additional accommodations, you are, or you have questions about the webinar, you could email us as mentioned there. We will be doing polls and evaluation questions. So as much as you're able, please be prepared to interact in that way. Any follow-up questions that you have that are not urgent, you can email to grassroots@hsri.org, but we aren't monitoring that email during the webinar. And so for any urgent matters, please do contact A. Lilinski at hsri.org. We don't offer CEUs. However, we can provide confirmation to you about your attendance if you'd like to get in touch. And Zoom is going to automatically send you a confirmation one day after the webinar. You're also going to receive a link to the recording of the webinar and the materials, and we've made the PowerPoint for today available on our website. The link there is on the screen, and we'll get that into the chat for you as well. So at this time, we would love to get a sense of who is joining us. You are going to see on your screen a poll that asks you, in what ways do you identify with the disability community? You are very welcome to select all that apply. We understand that people occupy multiple identities and roles in their lives. The options are person with a disability or disabled person, advocate, family member, or loved one, a person who uses long-term services and supports or HCBS services, someone working in a disability organization, or a caregiver or staff supporting a person with a disability. Then if you'll scroll up in this poll, you'll see that we're also asking some basic demographic questions so that we can understand the diversity of our participants. We're asking about gender identity and age group. We're also asking if you identify as Hispanic or Latino, what your race is, and that's the final question. So we'll give it just a few more minutes, but I see we've got great participation and we really appreciate that. And I see that there are great, many disabled people who've joined us. A majority of you are identifying as advocates. We see many family members and people working in disability organizations, and some caregivers and staff who are providing support to people with disabilities. So glad that you have joined us. I think we've got just about as many responses as we're going to get. So Laura, you're welcome to end the poll and we'll keep going. Thank you so much, folks, for responding. We appreciate that. All right, we're going to keep going now. And I'm going to share with you just a bit about the project, the Grassroots Project, and a bit about the webinar. So our work was launched just recently in 2023, and our mission, so to speak, is to support national, state, and local disability advocates in building networks that support them in staying connected to one another and to the policies that we know have an impact. We are supporting work across existing coalitions as well as supporting individual people with disabilities to work together, all with the aim of ensuring that their perspectives, I should say our I identify as a person with a disability. I've used a wheelchair my entire life. So the central aim here is to ensure that through our work together, that people with disabilities perspectives, priorities, and preferences are reflected in the service systems and the policies that support us. That's what we're up to. Our webinar today is an opportunity for you to hear from the community organizers and disability advocates about how they're building and collaborating in coalitions. We hope that you will gain strategies, tools, and questions about coalition building, and that we'll learn from our presenters about the challenges in coalition building, how to sustain them, and how they stay nimble and adapt. Quick chance for you to see our phenomenal team, all of whom is not represented on this screen. We have great colleagues at HSI who are also contributing to this project, but there on the screen you see Alex Bernardi, our co-director and also vice president at HSI, myself as co-director, and our phenomenal project coordinator, Laura Burness, who is working in the background to keep all of this going and is a phenomenal contributor to all of these concepts. So here's a bit about our project structure. We are working across a national coalition of ACL grantees, including the National DD Network, the National Independent Living Network, and a myriad of advocacy organizations, including the Self-Advocacy Resource Technical Assistance Center, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, the Paralysis Resource Center, and I hope I've not forgotten anyone. And NASHA, the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. Then we also have the advantage of an advisory group that's comprised of state membership organizations, including the National Association of Medicaid Directors, NASDs, the Association of State DD Directors, Advancing States, and the Association of State Head Injury Administrators. Then what you'll hear from today are the state and local advocacy coalitions that we work with, who are doing amazing work on the ground to advance disability advocacy. And then at the core of it all, of course, are individuals with disabilities, and we know that there are tremendous individual advocates out there making change. Our approaches are to develop structures and processes so that we can be supportive of cross-disability, cross-generational, and culturally diverse leaders within the movement. And then, of course, to connect and grow networks of grassroots advocacy and action coalitions. When we say advocacy, what do we mean? Well, there are so many forms of advocacy that are impactful. And the big, as we call it, the big A advocacy are direct action and lobbying. And in the context of this work, funded by ACL, we are doing what on your screen appears as little a advocacy. And those are things like education, information, dissemination, preparation, and organizing. So that's the context of our work. It is my pleasure now to introduce you to our coalition representatives. And I'll tell you a little bit about Carol so that you can know her background. Carol is joining us as Advocacy Program Specialist at the ARC of Illinois, where she oversees the Going Home Coalition, which is funded both through the Grassroots Project and the Coleman Foundation. She has also facilitated the launch of a Rev Up Illinois and through support, from the American Association of People with Disabilities, or AAPD. Before taking this role at the ARC of Illinois, Carol has served as a governor-appointed member of the Illinois DD Council, and when serving there, she was on the executive committee. Carol is passionate about creating affordable, community-supported, and inclusive housing options for people with IDD, and has held many other impressive roles. And I think I won't continue to read and instead pass it to you, Carol, with many thanks for joining us today. And we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kate. Good morning. Thank you. I'm really so appreciative of being here this morning and being able to speak to you about Going Home Coalition at the ARC of Illinois. My name is Carol Rosen. I use she, her, they pronouns. I'm a white woman. I would say middle-aged. Some people may say older. I have graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. I'm wearing gray glasses. I'm wearing a black t-shirt with a silver chain. Okay, I think you can advance that though. Thank you. Okay, I want to start out by giving you all a brief history of the Going Home Coalition. And Going Home Coalition has existed in several iterations at the ARC of Illinois for over a decade. The ARC of Illinois is a nonprofit organization that advocates for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm going to be calling that IDD at times, families, community organizations, to ensure that people with IDD can live, work, learn, and play in communities all over the state. It also offers resources and information, supports families in their individual advocacy efforts, and trains and educates people with disabilities, families, and professionals. Over the years, Going Home Coalition's name has evolved. It has been called the LIFE campaign. LIFE stood for Living with Independence, Fairness, and Equality. Then it became the Going Home campaign, the Going Home Community Inclusion Coalition, and eventually it is now its current name as Going Home Coalition. Regardless of its name, Going Home Coalition's overarching mission is to support full inclusion for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the community. And we're going to do a bit more exploration of that, of how that happens in the slides ahead. I do also want to mention how grateful we are to our past and current funders. Kate did mention that. They're the fuel which feeds our fire. Since I came on board in 2021, our funders have been the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities, the Coleman Foundation, and the Grassroots Project. And we are so very, very grateful. And again, in the slides ahead, you will see the essential importance of what this support has enabled Going Home Coalition to accomplish towards its advocacy goals. And then we can change the slide. Thank you. So Kate did a wonderful job of introducing me. And I do want to mention that my story with Going Home Coalition in itself is a lesson in advocacy. You can see on the slide that I'm holding, I'm in a picture, and I'm holding a picture of my daughter, who is now 21 years old. She has very complex physical and developmental disabilities. In 2019, one of the founding members of Going Home Coalition, who I served with on the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities, asked me to speak at a press conference for an advocacy event they were doing in the Illinois Capitol Rotunda. I did, and as a result, I started going to Going Home Coalition meetings after that. So when the coalition lost its manager, I was engaged to step in, and what a ride it's been. So one thing that was very clear to coalition participants when I came on board was a huge need to dig in and work. We spent many meetings and many hours redefining, reimagining, reinvigorating, and revitalizing Going Home Coalition and how and what was needed to move forward. Next slide. Thank you. We ended up recreating its vision and mission. And the vision of Going Home Coalition is for people with disabilities in Illinois to live in a truly individualized, person-centered systems with the supports and services they choose. And I would add, and have a right to. And everyone, no matter what challenges they may face, has the right to live a full life in the community. Community is strengthened by diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. Our mission became that Going Home Coalition is a diverse statewide network of self-advocates, families, community service providers, and allies. We purposely advocate to create systems change, transition away from institutional living through increasing community capacity, and empower fair and equal choices and opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I wanted to talk a little bit about who our stakeholders are. When I say self-advocates, I am describing a person who has lived experience with having an intellectual or developmental disability who advocates for themselves or others. We have service providers. Those are people that support and use funding to serve people with disabilities. We have advocacy organizations with a presence on a state or national level, Centers for Independent Living, the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities, and lately we're starting to see more legislators, staff, and legislators coming to our meetings, which has been really fantastic. We also engage, amongst others, our USED, who is through UIC in Illinois, and groups that have a large presence on social media, universities, I said UIC, but also ISU, and we also help them, like we engage their interns at times. And then we also know the importance of going outside of the developmental disabilities community and engaging housing developers, medical organizations, and human rights authority organization. And I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. So now here's where we're going to dig in a little bit deeper into what individuals and families are facing in Illinois right now. Even with a historic investment of $1 billion within the last 5 years into the developmental disabilities system, Illinois lags far behind the rest of the country in how people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are being supported. In fact, as of July 1, there are 1,591 residents living in 7 state-operated developmental centers scattered in different parts of Illinois. To get a clear understanding of what this means, 49 states in our country have fewer people in institutions, and only the state of Texas houses more residents in institutions. There are frequent, ongoing, substantiated cases of human rights violations in Illinois' state institutions, and the average cost per resident in an institution is over $350,000 per year per resident, whereas in community settings, the top line cost of funding can be around $150,000. There's an ethical imperative to change, and the financial resources used, rebalanced, and that are used in the institutions could be rebalanced and serve more people in the community. Going Home Coalition's core messaging advocates for the closure of Illinois' remaining 7 operated developmental centers. However, there's recognition that based on current community capacity, this is a tremendously heavy lift. So concurrently, that happens, but our advocacy centers around building community capacity and robust person-centered supports, which will create the framework for people with IDD to have lives in the community to which they have a right to, mitigate the risk of institutionalization, and create the ability to leave the paradigm of institutional living behind. We continue to ask ourselves as a coalition, how do we create change? Next slide. Going Home Coalition teaches advocacy. We empower our coalition members through teaching them advocacy skills and supporting self-determination. Participants are advocating for inclusion, independence, individualized person-centered supports, employment opportunities, fair wages for support staff, affordable housing, and accessibility to create systems change. And next slide. So how do we teach our coalition participants advocacy? We do this in a lot of different ways. We understand the need to be focused yet fluid and broad-based. So I'm just going to talk to you about a couple of things here for the sake of time, and happy to talk more to anybody offline. But one of the ways we do this is we have monthly meetings. Again, these are broad-based. They could be anywhere from talking to a state senator about how to advocate for appropriate DSP wages, other government staff that are in the developmental disabilities system, civil rights organizations that update us on legal issues facing the state, as well as how things are going in our institutional system. We also engage with the people who have oversight into actions of or allegations of abuse and neglect, such as our Inspector General and the Illinois State Police. And we've also looked, we're trying to be broad-based again and really bring a lot of the pieces of the puzzle together. We're looking at how people with DD are affected by homelessness, and when that happens with a co-occurrence of mental health issues. We also looked at how we can fill in some of the gaps where DD funding isn't, and that could be through 708 and 377 boards. And then I'm also going to talk just briefly about our legislative advocacy series. These are plain language, 9-module series on how a bill becomes a law, about voter education and registration, looking up your legislator, creating an elevator speech, how to submit a witness slip, arranging a meeting with your legislator, discussing politics with civility, which is of essential importance these days, how to become an election judge at polling places, and again, how a bill becomes a law federally. And these are paid opportunities for our co-presenters. And it is for everyone, because a lot of people really don't know these steps to becoming more engaged in legislative advocacy, and we're here to add those tools and resources to their toolbox. We also talked about, we created a membership directory, and what that's done for us, it's really pinpointed who wants to be more engaged and how they want to be engaged. So we know that we have many people who want to engage with their legislators more, many people who want to write a story to their newspaper, many people who want to do something else as an advocacy opportunity. And what it really pinpointed for us is how many people need support to do that. So we're really excited to dig in and get more people activated in that regard. Kate, you can change it first. So, I'm going to add one last thing. We also have worked with ISU to do a tech study, and this shows how our group has pivoted and become like doing all their advocacy and all their meetings virtually. So that was a really interesting creation of information. That's something that we've continued to pursue. So it's giving us a lot of resources there. We are in the process, what we do is we activate advocates. So Going Home Coalition is a place of collaboration. We aim to be inclusive in diverse ways. And we always ask our speakers if they know ways that our members can connect with what they're doing and become more involved. As a result, we have Going Home Coalition members who have been appointed to boards, gotten onto task forces, participated in national panels, and who have become peer mentors for others. We're always looking for ways to connect our members to opportunities. And here's what I want to point out about the importance of having funding. It has turned the spark of our advocacy into a fire, and it's allowed us to engage in even more robust and focused ways. Going Home Coalition coalesces and amplifies its mission and goals because of the passion and outstanding advocacy of our members. It is incredibly rewarding to see the passion and momentum of what we are accomplishing, and it's not a responsibility that I take lightly, and I know that others in our group are very, very motivated to keep moving the needle forward in Illinois. And our membership and our momentum is so increased that if my percentage calculator was correct, and I double checked, within the last year, people are understanding this energy, and our participant base has increased 700%, and our meeting attendance has increased 366%. So those are very, very exciting pieces of information. And then the last slide. We at some point there we did a survey to talk to people about their experience with Going Home Coalition. And when asked about their experience, survey participants said, "It helped me assist individuals in our self-advocacy group use their voices and actions to facilitate their own self-advocacy meeting. I'm learning how to let go of leading the meeting and assist members in leading their own meeting. Watching how your presenters led with respect to one another and allow everyone to speak and take turns has been inspiring." The number of people who attend the event provides strong motivation to follow up and take action. I acquired new ideas for advocacy. It helped me in being a better advocate for all. And I think one of the most important things is that it said that being a part of Going Home Coalition and learning those advocacy tools has been life-changing for their members. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak to you about Going Home Coalition today.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thanks for sharing your
Thank you.
insights and your leadership. I'll be really excited for the discussion right after we hear from our next coalition, which is with the Southern Disability Justice Coalition at New Disabled South. We're going to be hearing from Lila Zucker, and I would like to introduce you, Lila, who serves as the New Disabled South organizing director. She has more than 15 years of experience as an organizer, trainer, and movement builder. As a queer disabled organizer, Lila has spent her entire career building solidarity across intersectional movements in labor, voting, and social justice spaces. Union organizing runs deep in Lila's family. She began organizing within the labor movement in high school. Lila's deep belief in working towards our collective liberation through cross-movement and cross-disability solidarity guides all her work. Most recently, she's worked as Fair Fight Action's Deputy Organizing Director, where she oversaw the organization's voter education and turnout efforts. So it is my pleasure to welcome you, Lila, and I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, Kate. And thank you so much, Carol, for sharing with us about your incredible work in Illinois. It's wonderful to hear. Like Kate said, my name is Lila Zucker. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white woman in my mid-30s with a shaved head, wearing big gold hoop earrings, some big red and mint green glasses, and a dark green shirt that says, "Access is solidarity, is disability justice, is love." And I'm sitting in my home office surrounded by a variety of political posters and some slightly wilty plants behind me. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, and so folks are aware, most of the slides that I will be showing do not have visual elements on them. They do have the orange New Disabled South logo, which is 4 circles within a square, and any other visuals on my slides, I will describe those. But besides that, the content of the slides reflects what I am sharing with all of you. So a little bit about New Disabled South. That is our C3, and then we also have a C4, New Disabled South Rising, and we are fighting for disability rights and disability justice in 14 Southern southern states. And there is a picture of a map on this slide that shows our 14 southern states that are in our area, highlighted in orange. So those are Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia. And so all of the staff at New Disabled South identify as disabled, and we all live or have strong connections to the South as well. So we really, our whole organization is by and for disabled folks. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so what is our mission at New Disabled South? Our goal is to improve the lives of disabled people and to build strong disability justice and disability rights movements in the South. And our vision is a South where liberation and justice for all disabled people is achievable. And so a little bit about how we get there. So we have a coalition that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about, our Southern Disability Justice Coalition. And so that's a big part of our work. That's one of our flagship projects. And we are also fighting for policies at the state and local level that help to improve the lives of disabled people in the South. We're researching the most impactful issues that folks in the South are facing and finding solutions that center justice and community. We also do a lot of work around narrative change and lifting up the stories of disabled people and really changing how our country views disability and disabled people, that we are not a monolith, that there are so many different ways that folks are disabled, the ways that that presents and shows up, and that there is no one singular idea of what it means to be disabled. You can go to the next slide. And there are a bunch of links in my slides. And my understanding is everybody will be getting a copy, I believe, of the slides and the webinar after this. So you will be able to access those links from the slides after this as well. So a little bit about the reality of being disabled in the South. This slide has a lot of statistics on it. I'm not going to read all of them, but part of the reason that we are focusing on the South is, one, our founders live and are from the South, but also a majority of the 61 million disabled people in America reside in the South. And so a large number of them are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And so the intersecting issues at play really increase a lot of the disparities that folks encounter. And so just a couple of these statistics to highlight. 2/3 of the state and federal prison population in the entire country are disabled. And 50% of the people that are killed by police are disabled. Only 17% of polling locations in this country are accessible. And nearly 20% of all disabled voters face barriers to in-person voting in 2022. Also, disabled people live in poverty at more than twice the rate of non-disabled people. And so those are just a couple of statistics to highlight what it means and what the reality is of being disabled in the South. And also to highlight 3 of our pillars and focus of our work around criminalization, voting, and poverty and care. Alrighty, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what guides our work? So the work that New Disabled South does demands that we dream, and we not just exist in the world as it is right now, but that we dream and create a better world. And so disability justice specifically is at the center of everything that we do. And we believe in a world where full participation for disabled people in every facet of life is possible, and we work towards that every day. And disability justice, as was defined and coined by Sins Invalid, is this idea that centers on the wholeness of disability and all of its intersections with other identities and experiences. And disability justice is framed around the necessity of community and interdependence, and where those who are most impacted lead, and where cross-movement and cross-disability solidarity achieves collective liberation. And oftentimes change makers in this space work in silos, which can often limit our effectiveness and our community. And so that is one of the big goals of our coalition, is to break down those silos. And also, I just want to share, disability justice may be a newer topic or principle for some of you. So I encourage you to read a bit more about it if it's something that is new to you or you're not as familiar with. But just to sort of clarify some of the differences when we talk about disability rights, we often are referring to a political movement within the US that often focuses on gains within established systems and pushing for enforcement of existing laws, such as the ADA. And the disability rights movement has primarily and largely been led by white, cisgender, disabled people in the US. Disability justice, on the other hand, is a global framework that focuses more on the liberation of those who have been historically marginalized by those established systems. And it is mostly led by queer and BIPOC disabled folks. And disability justice is really by and for disabled people and focuses on the idea of not just surviving and existing within our current dynamics, but also being able to thrive and be full and complete people in our work. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our Southern Disability Justice Coalition. Also, we refer to it as SDJC. And so it is made up of 3 to 5 individuals or organizations from each of our 14 Southern states. And the folks that are part of this coalition are individual disabled leaders, staff at disability organizations, as well as staff from community organizations that maybe aren't disability focused, but want to bring that lens to their work. And so those members include a number of the protection advocacy organizations, organizations that have a focus on LGBTQ+ issues, reproductive justice work, civic engagement, and voter turnout organizations, as well as individual disabled activists who are leaders in their community. And we also have a number of student activists and more. And so to participate in the coalition, the members must agree to incorporate or strive towards the 10 principles of disability justice in their own work or in their work with the coalition. And there are no dues to participate in the coalition. You can go to the next slide. So the Southern Disability Justice Coalition aims to break down silos, to align on regional strategies, to lift up each other's work, and to create spaces for disabled Southerners to lead in creating this better world. And I saw that there was a question in the chat about silos and what that means. And so it's the idea of people working separately. And oftentimes that's not that it's intentional that our work is totally separate from each other, but oftentimes, and I'm sure many of you have the same experience, we are overworked and under-resourced, and sometimes making those connections and coordinating with other organizations takes more time or capacity than we may have. But it is so, so important. And we have seen all over this country that there are so many organizations doing similar work. And we've even seen that in the chat, people talking about similar things that they've done. And so one of the goals of our coalition is to connect folks that are doing similar work, to share strategies and resources and materials, and especially across the South, especially when it comes to a lot of things around voting and voter access. Many of our Southern states have enacted a lot of the same restrictions on voting access. And so members of our coalition are able to share strategies that they've used in one state to combat that with folks who are just starting that fight in other states, and to be able to share those resources to help everybody get what they need and develop those materials, but also be able to focus on not duplicating efforts that happen. And a big thing about our coalition is we are not, our goal is not for New Disabled South to say, this is what needs to happen in these states, but to lift up, support, and amplify the work that is happening on the ground, that has been happening on the ground for so long, and to connect those organizations and individuals to other folks doing similar work, to resources, to information, and to be able to strategize together to coordinate our efforts and to collaborate. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So logistically, how does our coalition work? So our coalition meets fully as usually about once a month. And in those meetings, we provide updates, information, and calls to action. And we also share those information and resources in between our meetings through email and a private Slack workspace that we have for our coalition members. We also have 4 active work groups that meet about every 6 weeks to every 2 months. And so those work groups are, we've got one on voting and elections, one on criminalization, one on home and community-based services, HCBS, and then another on labor, employment, and technology. And we came up with these work groups based on the work that the members of the coalition are doing and what they wanted to talk about and learn from other members around. And one wonderful thing about this coalition is we are relatively new. So New Disabled South is about 2 years old, and the coalition is only about 1 year old. And so we're pretty new to this work. And so we are constantly reassessing the way the coalition is set up, how it works, how we communicate, how we interact, how we support the members. And we do that through staff at New Disabled South having regular one-on-ones and conversations with the coalition members and really providing as many spaces as we can for people to give their open and honest opinion and share with us what is useful and helpful for them. And we don't want this coalition to be something that feels like added responsibility or something extra on their plate, but we want it to be something that adds to their work and is supporting that work that's happening. And so the organizing team, we're a team of 3. We facilitate the full coalition meetings, and then the working groups are facilitated between the staff and members of the coalition as well. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so that was a very, very quick run through of a little bit of information about the Southern Disability Justice Coalition and New Disabled South. And I know that many of the folks on today's webinar work with or for different disability organizations. And I saw a ton of people in the chat I'll have to go back to, but fellow Southerners, and we would love to connect with you. My information is on this slide. I will also repeat it and put it in the chat. But the best thing to do is to email our team. So email organizing@newdisabledsouth.org. And if you have any questions or want to work or partner with New Disabled South, we would love to connect with you. And in addition to the Southern Disability Justice Coalition that we facilitate, there's also other ways that individuals and organizations can be involved with our work. And we love connecting with other organizations and also being able to connect you with other people doing similar work or that are creating similar resources or that sort of thing. So that's to say that there's still some room for some new members in the coalition, but also that's not the only way to work with New Disabled South. And our approach to this work is very focused on intersectionality and coalition building, in addition to our set coalition that we have. And so I'm going to put some other links in the chat for some upcoming trainings and webinars that we have coming up to. We have one this Saturday on accessible voter outreach and engagement. It's going to be a training on some ways to do that. And then we have some wonderful panels coming up on the care crisis and criminalization and re-entry across the South. And so would love for folks to join those and get connected, and very excited to answer any questions that folks have. And I'll drop a whole bunch of links in the chat, which will also be shared out after this webinar with the other materials. And so with that, I will turn it back over to, I believe, Alex, who's going to facilitate our Q&A.
Lila, thank you. Thank you, Carol. You can hopefully join us as well. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Bernardi, and as Kate mentioned, I work alongside Kate to co-direct this grassroots project that is supported by the administration on community living. This has been a great conversation. Before we get launched, I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us and to provide a brief visual description of myself. As I've said, my name is Alex. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white woman with shoulder length, straight white hair. I'm wearing a black shirt and I have dark glasses, dark framed glasses. And I'm in my basement in front of a bookshelf with a whole lot of books piled on it. So, thank you both, Carol and Lila, for sharing what you've shared about the work going on in Illinois and the important work that's happening in the South with New Disabled South. We've had some questions come in, and I'm trying to keep an eye on chat as well. And I see already, Lila, you're starting to put some resources in. So as we get started, I'm going to take the opportunity first to answer one question that came in early on. This was, I think, more directed at the Grassroots Project, and it was a question from Diane asking, if we could describe our outreach effort in each state that will notify interested people of the opportunity to be part of their state's local grassroots project. And this is a great question, and I wanted to share this with this group. This is a grassroots project that is getting started and growing this year, and we are working with the national coalitions, which, as Kate mentioned, include the DD network, independent living networks around the country. And I would say that that would be one excellent way to make sure that there is outreach happening. And little teaser, we are getting ready to have a website, which will be a great place for people to find out what is coming up next. So with that, let me turn to a few other questions that have come in for you all. One of the questions that came in was related to how connections can be made, right? So some of the questions around, a question came in from Sandy. How are you working with members of the PNAs, that's the Protection and Advocacy Center, the existing entities that exist in your state around justice and rights? Sandy also mentioned the PAMI Council, which stands for Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness. I was wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about how you're connecting in with, with some of these groups that exist too. Carol, go ahead.
Okay. I fortunately inherited our PNA group when I became manager at Going Home Coalition. But since then, it's been really interesting because at one point we had a letter to the governor, and ACLU is one of the signers. So they're part of our group now. And it was a lot of reaching out. It's really using our participants to network as well. Guardianship and advocacy organizations, and then there's another like human rights organization. So it's just been networking at events. Even like the Disability Pride Parade in Illinois, in Chicago, is coming up on this weekend. There's connections there. Even through our voting work with Rev Up Illinois, that's a way that we're connecting in state-operated developmental centers on voting. But because there are other participants at these resource fairs on community transition, like I'm a big networker in that regard. I'm also a fan at an event, if you're speaking or have a table, that I'm not staying at the table. I'm going out to people at the event and introducing myself. That seems to be an important lesson that I learned. And then I don't want to hog up the airspace.
Sure. So we have a number of the PNAs in the South that are part of our Southern Disability Justice Coalition, and are talking with a number of the others. I actually just tabled at the National NDRN, the National Disability Rights Network conference. So got to meet and talk with a lot of folks all over the country. So that was wonderful. But one of the things that I think is really unique about some of the work that we do in our coalition and the work with the PNAs is that we want to really support and lift up the work that organizations are doing, that they are experts at, and that space. And so many of the PNAs have sort of set guidelines of what they can or can't do, or the types of projects they can take on, or the ways they can approach different issues or topics. And so we, in many cases, they maybe aren't as involved with community efforts or sort of community building. And so we'll do joint efforts with the PNAs and other community organizations to have sort of both of those perspectives and communities there. And also partnering with a lot of the PNAs to lift up and sort of clarify a lot of the voting changes that have happened across the South. Many of the PNAs track those and work on those. And so that's a big thing that we work with them to sort of coordinate those efforts. One thing I did want to just speak to, I saw in the chat, somebody was asking about different types of disabilities that are included with this work. And I know the PAMI Council there are many different opinions about PNAs and PAMI councils, and I would be happy to talk for a long time about those with anybody. And I worked at the PNA here in Louisiana for 3 years. So speaking from personal experience as well, that those organizations, again, have set guidelines of who they can support or assist because of federal funding and other regulations. But there are many, many organizations that exist to support people with all kinds of different disabilities. And so that's something that's really important with our coalition, is making sure that we are not excluding any disabilities or folks that are chronically ill or have invisible disabilities or dynamic disabilities like myself. And I just want to clarify that with the Southern Disability Justice Coalition and New Disabled South's work, we consider any sort of disability of any sort to be part of our community, whether folks have a diagnosis, don't have a diagnosis, want one, don't want one, were born with their disability, acquired it later in life, are out or public about being disabled, claim the disabled or person with a disability identity or chronically ill, or aren't really sure. All of these folks are part of our community, and we want to make sure that we are creating spaces for everybody to make their voice heard, and also understanding that there's certain lanes that folks have to occupy because of funding.
Yeah, and I want to just very briefly add to that, 100%. And if we have people who want to participate and contact us, we are happy to make those accommodations. Again, funding has allowed us to do things like ASL CART, Spanish captioning, and literally this week, we are beginning to implement that. And I'm like, hey, this is Field of Dreams. Now it's here. So let's make sure that you're digging into your networks and getting people here who want to be here and use these resources. So that's another important thing, that we individualize those supports, but now that they're there in a broader way, we want to make sure that there's use of them. So thank you, Lila.
So creating the broadest and most accessible way for people to be connecting with you.
And can I say one ironic thing? Like, we did this membership directory, and we ask people all the time, or we'll have people, like, we know people can't use those resources. We did this brilliant membership directory. We're so very proud of ourselves. And I had self-advocates call me and they're like, I don't know how to do this. And so it's like, we could do individualized supports for them, but we were feeling just so smug. And I was working with someone with disabilities. So it's like, again, it's just this, like, there's so many moving pieces. I think my slides today are another great example. I inherited certain colors. I inherited a logo. I did a beautiful slide deck. Then it was like passed through the accessibility standards, and the slides totally changed. So it's like, that was a great learning, you know, a great lesson for me. So I think there's, again, that fluidity that we talk about, and that willingness to like pivot and really change, and as we move through things.
So thank you, Carol. This takes us into another question that came through, and some of this is about outreach and connecting with people. Now, a question from Christopher was about what role do you see AI? I think that means artificial intelligence or VR, virtual reality, and new media, different ways of connecting with people, right? Playing into the task of connecting people with resources, advocacy networks, support agencies, and connecting to community members who are interested in this advocacy work. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about where your organizations are thinking in terms of connecting with people in a range of different ways.
Yeah, I guess I can start. Yeah. So this is a big focus for us, and something that we're constantly sort of working through. And I just wanted to sort of go back to what Carol was just talking about as far as the accessibility, in that I think in terms of accessibility and networking and reaching out to folks and making sure we're connecting with everybody in our community, is that all of us are going to do things wrong or mess up sometimes, and that's okay. And what is most important, and I think one of the wonderful things about coalition work, is that we learn from each other, and we can call each other in and help support the work that is happening, that some organizations may not know or have the resources to be as accessible or to do the kind of outreach that they would like to do to reach more folks. And in a coalition space, we can help each other with those resources, that information, and that support, that I think is really incredible. And I think we all are trying to do our best, and we're all learning and growing all the time. And so just recognizing that nobody is going to get any of it right all the time, and that's okay. And that we need to recognize that and support that. And so we are really trying to reach disabled folks where they're at. And in the South, especially, that's a lot of rural areas. And so we found that a lot of times that means that a lot of the sort of standard ways of doing outreach, of like, you know, big community events or social media, may not be as accessible for folks due to different assistive technology, or different access concerns, but also things like there isn't broadband available in lots of parts of the South. And in many parts of the South and rural areas, folks can't get good cell phone or internet connection. So reaching out to people that way doesn't always work. So we try to partner with organizations that are out in the community all of the time, that are out there talking to folks, meeting them where they're at. That's a big focus of our work. And so that's both partnering with those groups that are really doing that work and have those relationships in the community, and also doing things like visiting congregate settings to provide information about voting rights and access, and going where a lot of other organizations maybe aren't. I think a lot of the folks on this call are going to those places a lot, but many sort of political or community organizations aren't always doing that. And so for us, it's really about also asking people what they need and recognizing that we may not know what those needs are. And so there may be ways that we're not currently communicating with people in a way that works for them, but we let people share that with us, and trying to, as much as possible, do virtual events so folks can hear about them ahead of time, can plan for them. They aren't restricted for certain areas or people that have the access to be able to get there, the money, the ability to get childcare, transportation, or what have you. And also supporting in-person events that are happening, that our partner organizations are doing really in the community to have those conversations. But I think part of it is just recognizing that there's some places that all of us or our organizations may not have relationships or be. And sometimes we don't need to be the ones that are going into certain places. Maybe there's other organizations that are doing that outreach that we can partner with. And so I think really building those relationships, even just on a sort of individual level, can be so important for getting out in the community and reaching folks where they're at. And I'm going to add one more thing and then I will stop talking. Sorry for bogarting the time. We also have, Carol, you mentioned plain language resources. And so we've developed a plain language policy dashboard, which helps to translate the language and the text of different bills into plain language to make them more accessible for folks. And so part of engagement is also making sure that it's accessible at every level and having multiple ways that people can get engaged and be involved with the work. And also, I just want to say that I think recognizing that there's no one single way to be involved or one right way to be involved, and that all of us, especially as disabled people, have many different ways that we can be involved or limits on what we're able to do. And so providing lots of opportunities for everybody to engage where they're at and acknowledging that that is wonderful and useful and productive, even if it's not what we think of as the standard way of being involved.
Thank you, Lila. I would add, I mean, I think Lila's made some fantastic points on this. I would say that we all need moments of grace. And I know for what I do, I take the responsibility, as I said, very seriously. And I am nothing without the collaboration of our participants, right? Because I feel sometimes like I'm there more as an alchemist than like a manager. It's like taking those energies, because people are doing amazing things in the advocacy space where we are. So it's having that grace. I want to specifically address AI, and I want to specifically address the plain language. In AI, we do have some people using it as they work through secondary education programs or some of our materials, and they'll take those materials and put them into AI and come up with a plain language version. I've also asked people as they give me data. We're getting very data driven in the sense that we want it to be a framework. So if people are willing to do that, and actually there's a Grassroots Project member who's been really helpful with data. And so they've also given me plain language understanding, like, okay, so what this illustrates is X, Y, and Z. One of our participants is a self-advocacy, also like a coalition, and they are creating plain language materials with University of Illinois Chicago on the rights of people in SODCs and trying to get that to people in the state institutions. Also, I'm pretty convinced, and I want to just say this from a super loving place, from that moment of grace. It's like, I feel like my actions, they're often a bit under scrutiny. And I really agree with Lila. Like, we're always trying to do our very best. There are constraints on our time and our energy. And it's kind of funny. I was doing some voting work and I had a time parameter. And one of the things is that we connect people to resources in other languages. Or we talked about creating materials in Spanish. And then the next thing is like, why aren't you doing it in this language? And it was from a great place. And it wasn't that resource wasn't there. It's that, like, I need the space to be like, and if it wasn't there, then I just need the space to be like, okay, like, let's look into this. So I think these are great examples. And I think everyone needs plain language. What I find is, like, we did our legislative advocacy modules. It's unfair of us to expect people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who we serve, when nobody really has a deeper understanding of legislative advocacy. So it's been this really wonderful transition too, is to activate everybody. It's not like, these are, accessible resources benefit everyone. And that's, again, something that is really important to me in the life I have as a parent to a person with a disability. And so I'll just leave it at that. But I do think that those are really great points that Lila made, and I hope I added to the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you both for just being so open and frank with your experience as well. I want to pivot a little bit to a couple questions that have come through related to managing some of the coalitions, right? There was a question that came through saying, what challenges do you face in working and managing a coalition? And part of this is also how to manage different advocacy priorities at once, right? And I'd love to hear both of you talk a little bit about the experiences you have had managing, which certainly are multiple important priorities, and then figuring out a way to be able to focus energies so that you can be successful. I'll leave it up to you who would like to
You
start.
want to grab that first, Lila? Oh, okay. I think just say it again, Alex, just so I'm just clear the way I want to approach it.
So the question was, to start, what challenges do you face in working and managing a coalition, right? And I think I nested another question underneath there about general advice about how to manage many different advocacy priorities that would come in through your coalition.
Okay, those are great questions. And they're a little bit different than each other. The challenges that we have, like we had a gap in our funding, and that was really, really detrimental to the coalition. It just didn't, it's better when we can, when we're straightened out and we have a really clear direction and we can really, really push and grow. And I mean, I've seen unbelievable changes in the strength, participation, and how we're able to approach multiple aspects of our advocacy goals. I think that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is like the blessing of having so many participants, but what that takes to keep people's data safe and get meeting notices out there, making sure we have enough time to adequately prepare and push out those materials to everyone as we begin to use CART, ASL, and Spanish captioning, that we make sure that those materials are translated. Like, it's one thing to say, come to the meeting, there's Spanish captioning, and then you get something in Messenger saying, I need a translator. And then, so like, I'm writing back from Google Translate. Like, so, and I'm happy to do that. Do you see what I'm saying? But that is one of the challenges. I think an interesting part of what's happening with Going Home Coalition right now is that we again need to refocus, revitalize, reinvigorate, and we need to get clear again, like we've done this for the past year. Let's see what we think is particularly successful. Let's see where we want to move ahead. And I think that there's a really important part of what's going on from dialogue within coalition members, that there will be some changes coming up, and how best to approach that is that through specific people who have a particular interest in a group. Like, are there more people that are interested in taking on voting issues and accessibility? Are there more people who are interested in looking at our waivers? Are there more people that are interested in really saying, you know, what is the deal with accessible, affordable, integrated housing? Like, let's look at these issues. And I do feel people have broad-based interest, and what my goal was as Going Home Coalition manager is to really bring these tools and resources to people, because I also feel that people don't know what they want to advocate on until they know all these different parts of the spoke of the wheel. So I'm going to leave it at that. You know, certainly time, I would say time. There are not enough hours in the day. And this, for me personally, it's like, this is not just something I do. This is my, you know, my OS, my operating system. I really want to make changes in the Illinois DD system. So this is an important thing. So it's like, I'm so appreciative of the people that feel the same way and are able to do that. And I'm also like, just whatever people get from this is a great thing, because people are learning. And as a result, like, we've had so many beautiful small moments. There was somebody who could not stay in their community residential home and was sent to a nursing facility 3 hours away from any family member, and was able to advocate and get themselves back home. We have a wonderful person who has lived experience in an SODC, was there twice and was able to finally leave, and now has attained their GED and met with their legislators, is going to be doing a video about, so it's just a wonderful thing to see and connect people. And that's something that I touched on in the presentation, that someone can work on voting work and then on a local level and be asked to participate in a national panel. So there's just like really great small moments. And, we're looking at larger moments too, and how people are going to participate in saying, like, this is not okay, and this is important to us. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. So there are definitely challenges. And I think one of the most important thing about advocacy is you have to be willing to face those, or you can't just give up and, wave your hands and walk away. You really don't have that choice. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Carol. I think you brought up a lot of really, really important points. And I apologize if I start cutting in and out. There's a massive thunderstorm rolling through here in New Orleans. So if you have any issues with my audio, please let me know. But I think there's a lot of challenges. And when I say that, I don't mean that those are like problems, but rather coalition work is difficult. It is so worth it. But it is really, really hard. And there's a number of reasons it can be really hard. And I think one of the sort of unique things that we're running into with the Southern Disability Justice Coalition is that we do not have a single staff person that is dedicated to staffing the coalition. It is one of the projects of myself as organizing director and my team. There's 3 of us. We cover 14 states. And so the way that the coalition is set up is more for currently is for members to share information and resources, and for us to provide spaces for those connections to happen and for facilitated conversations. And if there are organizations that want to work together to organize events or campaigns, we will happily and eagerly jump to work with them and provide organizing support, advice, resources, what have you. But because we don't have a single dedicated staff for the coalition, it does make it harder for the coalition as a whole to sort of move forward campaigns or processes, because all of the members of the coalition do their own work in the community. That's why they're part of the coalition. And so they're doing all of this incredible work. And so they don't necessarily have capacity to take on additional projects with the coalition. And if we had a, single person that was staffing that, like I know many incredible coalitions do, it would make it a little bit easier for us as staff to sort of do more of that work, or provide resources or bring that together, that unfortunately we can't. And that's also part of how we set up the coalition. And so I don't know if that will be something we change with it in the future, but I think sort of recognizing the capacity of the people that are part of the coalition, and for us, so many of our members are so excited about the coalition, but they just literally don't have the time or energy to attend meetings. And so a big thing that we're navigating is, how do we keep those folks engaged? How do we hear about the work that we're doing so we can uplift that, so we can share that, so we can share out their resources and materials without putting a bigger burden on them to do that on top of them actually implementing their programs. So we're definitely trying to sort of navigate how we best support the members of the coalition and recognize their often limited ability to participate because of the work that they're doing. They're out there doing the work. And then also, I think I just want to recognize that crip time is real. That's a phrase that many folks in the disability community use, that as disabled people, the way that we move through the world is different because of the numerous barriers that are in our way for just about everything, depending on your disability, where you are, etc. But part of that also means that many of us have flare-ups or get sick, and oftentimes have less energy or capacity to do certain types of work during those times. And just acknowledging the reality of being both disabled staff and a coalition of primarily both a lot of disabled activists, though not entirely, that does change sort of that there's often so much that we want to do that we aren't able to, and that's okay. And I think recognizing that and providing space to lift that up and have the discussions and make sure that people can engage in ways that are energizing for them. And so that also means creating spaces that aren't just work spaces. So creating spaces for disabled joy is a really big thing for us, both in person and virtually, and really lifting up those moments when we can be in community with each other, that isn't just focused on how do we organize to survive, but really thinking about how we thrive.
And thank you. And I just want to add to that. I think Alex, I'm sorry. I think Lila said something really important that I feel that we are also shifting towards, and it's really understanding that pushing responsibilities towards other coalition members who are like super capable, and not, it doesn't mean the expectation is like, no, you manage all of this. But, you know, for example, like something that jumps to mind is we had an hugely important meeting with the Department of Developmental Disabilities and the Illinois Department of IDHS. Sorry, I'm like losing my letters. Amy will put it in the chat. And my daughter's direct support person couldn't be there, and she needed help using the restroom. And I was able to turn that meeting off so I could put her in her, you know, and hand it over to someone, put myself on mute, put myself off audio, and just say, hey, can you guys handle this? We also really delegate a lot of the questions that we do in the meetings to our participants. And we're really supporting and implementing member-driven ideas that as meeting ideas. And it's like really saying, okay, if you want to do this, I need your help with this. Our meeting notes, like it's sort of a personal crusade. I make them like novels in hopes that people understand that that is a resource that they can go back to. We have video links. We now record as much as possible. We always ask, of course, but you know, we'll try and send that out. Again, there's a little bit of protection of our participants, because I would like people to still run it through whatever we have in place as administration, that it's just not just generally out there in a broader way. And that's something I need to address. And the other thing, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, but that's super helpful. And yes, I agree with you, is again, those moments of grace, knowing that we can't accomplish everything that we would love to, you know, we would love to. Oh, and actually there was one more quick thing, that because we're virtual and there's things that we always have to accommodate, that the way we achieve that growth is really understanding that the statewide presence that we were going to achieve was going to be through a platform that is virtual. So thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you, Kate, for bringing our final evaluation up. That is our cue that we have gotten to the end of our ability to have this conversation. It's been really, really rich. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions that were in chat, but as my colleague Laura put into chat, we have collected up all those questions and we can post answers if our participants would be willing to answer some of them. Also know that each of them have shared their contact information and I think are willing to be connected with any of you who are looking to be following up. I just wanted to say to you before we move to our evaluation, thank you both. And Lila, as you were talking about some of the the challenges that exist around doing the organizing while at the same time people are very much connected in their own communities doing the work very much resonates for me. I saw Carol nodding her head, and if we were able to have all of us together with our cameras on, I think you would have probably seen a whole lot of general nodding, because that seems to resonate tremendously for a lot of folks. Thank you both. I'd like to turn it to you, Kate, to wrap it up.
Thanks, Alex. What a phenomenal conversation you just facilitated. You see on your screen here our final slide. There is a QR code you're welcome to scan to get to our website. And our website is also very easily accessible from the chat. We've put the link there. It's just https:// Project. And Laura has put up our satisfaction survey. We would really appreciate if you could stay on and complete this survey for us. It helps us show our funders how you're receiving this content, and it also helps us know how to shift and change to better meet the community's needs. So we'd love to know how likely you are to take action in your advocacy as a result of today's activities. Second question, if you'll scroll down, is how likely are you to connect and collaborate with new people as a result of this activity? And the options are extremely likely, very likely, somewhat likely, not so likely, and not at all likely. And those options repeat for each question. The third question is, how likely are you to engage with us at the Grassroots Project again? Fourth question, I feel more ready and comfortable in advocating as a result of this activity. And those options are yes, no, and prefer not to say. We'd also like to know how accessible this webinar was for you. You can say very, somewhat, or not at all. If you keep scrolling, the sixth question is, how did you find out about this webinar? Maybe it was, we've given you some options there, an ACL email, NCAPS email, social media, word of mouth. Seventh question, do you feel you gained any knowledge through this activity? Yes, no, or prefer not to say. Eighth question, how did you find out about the Grassroots Project? Was it through an ACL email, an NCAPS email, social media, word of mouth? And that is the last question. I see many of you are still responding, so we're so grateful to have your responses there. And we really do hope you'll get in touch with us or with the presenters if there are other questions that you have. We'll have future webinars. We hope you'll join us for those. And we cannot thank Lila and Carol enough for their candor and their insight and their hard work in organizing. All right, so at this point, we're just gonna leave the poll up. I'm gonna take the slides down, and folks can take as much time as they'd like completing that poll. We'll leave it up for a couple more minutes. And thanks again for being with us. And thanks to the interpreters and the captioners and our translators. Bye-bye.